So in all my years of investing, I've seen many investors make the same mistakes over and over again. And a lot of these can be avoided. And this is costing them so much time and money, but especially time, years. And part of the reason is because they're not seeing the mistake early on, and they only find out 4 or 5 years, sometimes 10 years later. Sometimes they never find out. And so these are mistakes that can be avoided, and I'm going to share a few of them with you. However, before doing that, I want to sort of share with you a little bit about my background and why I'm sharing and how I've come to this point in my investing career. I started with reading Rich Dad Poor Dad in the late 1990s when it first came out, and it honestly was an eye-opener. It was an incredible aha. In fact, it was the first book I ever read cover to cover in one time, right? One night. So I think it took me several hours, but it was an incredible book. And then soon after that, the next book was The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki as well. Now, this was in the late 1990s, and it really opened my eyes because I had been already trying to invest and doing different things, but it was a huge impact. It had a huge impact on me. Now, my last corporate job was 2001. That's when I left corporate America, 2001, and I was 32 years old, and I've never worked for corporate America since then. This was over 25 years ago, actually. And so I've been investing and running my businesses and all that full time since then. And I haven't looked back, and I'll tell you, it was the best thing that ever happened. But I've had my own share of mistakes that I want to share with you. But I've been very lucky in being guided by some very experienced and very successful investors that really helped me avoid some mistakes, but also point out some mistakes that I was making. And again, I have so much to share, and I'll be sharing some of these throughout on this YouTube channel. But I want to really focus on a few right now and help you start seeing sort of the big picture. So when I first started investing, I started with stocks and mutual funds. This was in the 1990s, and then shifted very quickly into real estate investing with rental properties and apartment buildings, and I loved it. I also did a lot of private money lending, and later on moved into, again, the stock market, buy and hold. I was never much of a trader. I loved real estate, but I learned a lot of things from real estate, and I saw what other real estate investors had made, the mistakes they've made, which again I'll touch on again, and we're going to cover in more detail on this YouTube channel. Now, I'm the type that's very skeptical in nature, so I have to always understand when someone tells me something. I have to understand the why behind it, and so you'll see me always sharing information from a very skeptical perspective because that's who I am. But it also made me a very successful investor because it makes me question certain things. And my background is in software. I worked at, some of you know, at Intuit, working on Quicken Financial Planner, some other products. And meanwhile I was there, I was investing as well. So I've been, like I said, I left corporate America in 2001, and I've never looked back. I was very fortunate to also work with other investors and see what other investors are doing, and I've learned a lot from their mistakes, and I even saw their mistakes ahead of time. In fact, I was being guided by some very successful investors that told me this is what's going to happen to this investor. This is what's going to happen to this investor. Even though they looked successful, I learned a lot. But guess what? I'm seeing this same exact pattern with a lot of investors, and it's kind of scary. So I also authored 3 best-selling books. In fact, I have it right here: Wealthy Code, Banker's Code, and Debt Millionaire. These are the ones that were published and on Amazon and did extremely well. But I've also published other books for our own members, many books. And so you'll see these were published in, let's see, when was this published? I think, this was in 2010, but it says 2014 here. Oh, I know, this is the second edition. So my first book was published 2010. I had been already, I had written it before that, obviously, but I learned a lot, like I said, from and I posted some of these lessons in these books. And if you ever decide to read them, you should read them in that order. Wealthy Code first. In fact, you can look at the spine and you can see number 1, 2, and 3. It's a series. So what I want to talk about is a few lessons right now. The first lesson I learned is when I first started, I would always say, I'm a real estate investor and I'm only a real estate investor. I don't care about the stock market. I don't care about anything else. And I'll tell you, that was one of the biggest mistakes. One of the things I learned is when you combine certain assets, when you have non-correlated portfolio, meaning you have real estate, you have other investments or assets that are non-correlated, this is magic. And so you can't just say, I'm only going to do real estate, or I'm only going to do stock market, or you can't say, I'm just going to avoid bonds, for example, because the yields are too low, whatever. Let me just tell you this. The more you know, and the more you're open to different assets, the more you can combine them in ways that create what I call hybrid assets. I love that part because it has helped me so much in putting together portfolios that can withstand different things, but also increase liquidity. Let me give you one example. In real estate, you don't have liquidity. And I've seen an investor who had well over 100 properties lose everything within 18 months. Because they had properties all over the country and they had very little liquidity, even though there was cash flow coming in, but they weren't structured correctly. And what I realized is you can't really, you have to have enough liquidity. So I told this investor, I said, you have to be more liquid than what you have. And he kept saying, money sitting in a checking account is waste of time. But he thought liquidity and money sitting in the bank account are the same thing. They're not, right? Liquidity is much broader than that. And liquidity is, I would say, powerhouse. It's the oxygen in your investments. And so what happened is I started shifting and adding more to my real estate portfolio by buying different things that are more liquid, like ETFs and certain things. But the point here is, don't just focus on one asset and say, this is the only thing I'm going to do, right? You have to be open to other things and use the combination of these assets to really improve your portfolio. It's very, very powerful and then you want to look into what's called non-correlated assets. Build a portfolio of non-correlated assets so that when something goes down, let's say real estate goes down, you have other things you can that will sustain your wealth and keep you going. So I cannot stress that enough. So avoid just focusing on one asset and just be open to other asset types. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and invest in everything. I'm just saying take the time to understand different asset classes because the combination is where the magic happens. I can't stress that enough. The next thing I want to share is this idea of control. I notice a lot of investors, they make these financial decisions and where they have no control whatsoever. They make a decision and they hope and pray that whatever it is they did will work. What I want to share with you is you have to ask yourself, is there a sense of control? Now, you never have 100% control over anything when it comes to investing. But do you have some control or more control than other assets that you can use to your advantage? So if you think about gambling, you go to gamble, you go to the casino and you just bet on a roulette table. Well, obviously a roulette table, you don't have any control, right? But if you can, with your investments, have some control, right, and use that to your advantage, that's huge. And so, for example, when you're buying a property, let's think about that for a second. You have a lot of control over what type of mortgage you pick, how much is the LTV, all of that stuff. So it turns out, and I've talked about this in other videos, there's two games going on. There's the rate game, and then there's the capital game. And make sure you watch my other videos on that. The rate game, you have no control over the rate. But you do have control over the capital, some more control than the rate game. And you can use that to your advantage big time, big time. I cannot stress that enough. And I'll ask you to really consider watching other videos I have on this channel about the rate game and the capital game, because those small advantages, the small pieces of control that you have, you can use to change the whole trajectory of your investing. I don't like being in a place where I hope and pray something happens, right? Which is rate game. I like being more in control. And one of the things I learned from real estate is you have more control over certain things and about spreads, about things like that. Again, you never have 100% control. But the key part here is every investment you do, ask yourself, what are the variables I can control? And how can I make that sort of the main focus? Again, in capital game, you have a lot more control. And a lot of our members are crushing it right now because they understand the control. And so here's what it turns out. There are 4 key levers. There's more, but the 4 key levers for control are leverage, spreads, portfolio, how you design your portfolio, and liquidity. And those 4 levers are critical to your success. And the more you know how to control them, the more you can move and adjust your investments depending on the market and things like this. Look, you can never read the market, but these are signals on how to control, how to adjust your levers. And this gives you so much more power and confidence knowing that in any situations, I know exactly what to do. That's really powerful. Just like when you're driving a car. When you're driving a car, you have no control over what's happening outside, what's on the freeway, what's the traffic like, but you have control over the car itself. You can slow down, you can go faster, you can take an exit. That's the same exact thing you can do in investments. And this is not specific to real estate or anything. This is just in general. You can play the capital game no matter what the asset is. You just have to take the time to learn about it. So take the time to learn about capital game versus the rate game. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, and this ties in with control as well. The whole journey of investing boils down to this one thing. If you understand this one thing, it makes all the difference in the world. And that is spreads and velocity of money. So let's talk about spreads first. You've probably heard me, if you've heard me speaking or anything like that, I always talk about matching the right assets with the right financing. What I mean really by that is you want to have stable assets with stable financing and create a spread that you can control. And anyone that knows me will tell you that I always say the person who can control both sides of the spread wins. And so when we talk about matching assets with the financing, that's the secret sauce. It's not just assets, it's not just financing, it is the matching of those, pairing them correctly. That is critical. That is called a spread. You want to build a spread because that means now you're not having to work for the money. You're having the assets work to generate the money. And this is critical because right now, if you understand how the system works, most people have to work to get capital to invest. And that rate at which they're getting the capital, what's called the savings rate, is so small and so low for the average person that it's very difficult to build wealth. But when you can buy assets and match them with the right debt so that the asset itself pays down the debt, it's very powerful. And that helps you move much faster on your journey. So the idea is get spreads in place and then turn the money. That's velocity of money. Again, I'm going into too much detail here, but I'm giving you a high level here, which is understand that the game is built around spreads. Why spreads? That means the assets themselves are going to pay for the financing, and you don't have to work as hard, because now you are moving way faster towards your journey. And the next part I want to talk about, again, is the new game. It turns out that this is something that I really, again, given my background being very skeptical, was very difficult for me to accept, but it's the truth. We are all being influenced by someone else's rules. Let me give you an example. When you first started opening a bank account, you were told, here's how things happen. You open a bank account, you get some checks, you write checks, you use credit cards. All of these are someone else's rules. And it turns out that a lot of those rules don't favor us. In fact, they favor everyone else. And the more you understand how the system is set up, you are playing using someone else's rules. You end up being a pawn in the game. And it's time to change those rules. And it goes against the grain when I say that sometimes you have to understand that certain things you're doing currently are actually incorrect because they are favoring someone else. I'll give you a simple example. How many times have you heard, take a 15-year loan, a mortgage, versus a 30-year mortgage, and then pay it off fast because it's lower interest rate, and instead of being in debt for 30 years, you're in debt for 15 years. Worst advice. And that is because it's favoring someone else. They're shifting the risk to you because as you pay it faster, you are making the bank in a better position. You see, again, this is just one example out of many. When you're a borrower and you have a banker, the rules are when it comes to risk, one has to take on more risk, one has to take on less risk. So what the bank does very, very cleverly, to be honest, is they shift the risk to you. How? By telling you, here's a 15-year loan, which is a lower interest rate. Take that over a 30-year loan anytime. What they're actually doing is shifting the risk to you because now you have these really high payments for 15 years straight. And if you have a hiccup on the 15 years, it's a problem. But also at the same time, because their loan is getting paid down faster, they are taking a safer position now. Instead of being at, let's just say, 80% LTV, they are at 50% LTV. They are much, much safer position. And they love it. That's why they're willing to give you lower interest rate because they're shifting the risk to you. I can go on and on and on, but there's so many rules that you're falling for that are actually shifting the risk to you and forcing you to work for much, much longer than in your life. And honestly, it sucks when you can see them very clearly. So you're being influenced by someone else's rules, and so you have to step back at some point and ask yourself, what are the rules that I need to have and I need to pass on to my own loved ones so that we are put in a position where we can move faster towards our financial goals? Because otherwise, this game that you're in is someone else's game. So you have to really start thinking about what we call the financial ecosystem. Whose financial ecosystem are you in? And if you're not sure, that means you're in someone else's financial ecosystem. We help our members start building their own financial ecosystem by telling them, this is the financial ecosystem, you're a pawn, and here's what you're doing right now, and this is why it's wrong. This is why it favors someone else. Step out and create your own financial ecosystem within the bigger financial ecosystem and set your own rules that favor you. Anyways, so I just want you to know that you are playing someone else's game, and you have to start asking yourself, when is it time for me to step away and start creating my own rules? Now, I kept these very high level so that this way you can start questioning certain things you might be doing right now. Again, I have so much to offer in terms of lessons learned and what to do, and I kept this very high level just to introduce the topic of question everything, because ultimately you can move way faster than you realize. You can move so much faster towards your goals, but because you are stuck in this game, that's someone else's game, someone else's rules. So always question that. So hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm going to be sharing a lot more like this, but if you enjoyed this, go ahead and please give me a thumbs up and tell me what you got. What are some of the rules you think you're playing by that are either good or bad? And the more we can share in this, the better, okay? And share this video with someone else. And if you haven't done so, subscribe right now. I'll see you soon.